Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 2012 William M. and Katherine B. Ginder Lecture. Bill Ginder is a graduate from the McCoy College, which was the previous incarnation, or actually was the keeper of business education at the Johns Hopkins University. He graduated in 1954. Bill Ginder was former president, vice chairman, and CEO of Crown Central Petroleum. He endowed this lecture, and we've had the series since 1994, because he really believed that it was very important for sort of senior members of the business community to be able to share their wisdom, share their experiences with up-and-coming leaders, and in some ways to act as a mentor to the next generation of business leaders for this country. That passion has been shared by many of those who have come to talk to us about their experiences. People like Ben Carson, noted neurosurgeon at Hopkins, people like Pete Peterson, former Secretary for Commerce of the US, people like Kevin Plank, who is CEO and founder of Under Armour. As tonight, we have somebody who is truly an American entrepreneur, a maverick and innovator, someone that I think we will all very much enjoy listening to. Jim Rogers has had a great passion in higher education. He was formerly chancellor of the Nevada higher education system. The law school at the University of Arizona is named for him. He began his career as a lawyer, but very quickly moved into broadcast media, into the financial services industry, and has sat on quite a long list of university boards. He currently serves as a member of the Carey Business School's Board of Overseers. So Jim, I'm going to let you talk about what you want to talk about, as always.
I appreciate that.
Then we'll come back and have
let me say this to begin with. I have Parkinson's, all right? So I will be moving around because the tremors come from time to time. And it's not that I'm afraid of you. What I'd like to do is give you a little history of our industry, how much has changed in the last 40 years, go back and see how I tracked along with that, and where I see our industry going, because at the moment, television broadcasting, at least in news, is a dying breed. And we're all sitting out there trying to figure out what can be done to save it. I'm a kid that I grew up in a place called Los Alamos, New Mexico. My father was up there when they were building the A-bomb. And then we moved to Nevada when they opened the Nevada test site. And one of the things that my father always told me was, pick a trade where you don't have to work for somebody. Because when you work for somebody, you're there at their whim, all sorts of strange things will happen, and you'll be down the road. Well, I looked around and I thought being a lawyer probably would be a pretty good thing. So I living in Las Vegas, Nevada, and when my family moved there in '51, it was 21,000 people. Now it's 2,800,000 people. When I started to practice law there in 1964, there were 110 lawyers. Now there are 8,000. So the place has changed substantially. When I got out of law school, following along with my dad's advice, I came to Las Vegas, and I didn't want to go in with anybody. I should have, because I didn't know anything, but I didn't want to go in with anybody, so I became kind of a sole practitioner, and every day was tough. I couldn't find the courthouse door most of the time. And I had fallen in love with the First Amendment. I thought that's the greatest one-liner ever written. So as we were watching television in Las Vegas, and I think at that time, there are 206 markets, maybe 209. At that time, Las Vegas, I think, was about the 140. New York being number 1, Helena, Montana being number 209. I own 209. I wish I owned 1. So I'd been practicing from 1964 till about 1971, And a new ruling came out from the FCC that said that they really would like to see local owners owning television stations rather than these big conglomerates across the country, and that way local news would get more of a pitch, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So on September 1st of 1971, I got 17 of my best friends together, and we filed an application against Don Reynolds to take his Channel 3 license away from him. Don Reynolds at the time was the richest man in the state. He owned 131 newspapers across the country. He owned every television station in the state and all over the place. And the morning after I filed, my friends called and said, "We don't want to have dinner with you anymore. We don't want to be in a car with you anymore because your life is over, buddy." Well, I hired a law firm in Washington, top law firm, Welch and Morgan. And we proceeded to go forward to file the application and say that we were a group of people. We had school teachers and dentists and doctors and every other damn thing you could think of in the group. And by golly, we were really set to run a TV station. We had a gal here who taught 3rd grade, and she could teach cooking, and somebody else over here could do this with sports. I mean, it was the height of stupidity. So, anyway, I'll go back and forth on this stuff. We litigated this from 1971 to 1979. We went to the United States Supreme Court twice. After the initial decision by Judge Namowitz, then we went to the Circuit Court, and Justice Clarence Thomas was the chief judge at that time. We went to the Supreme Court twice, and finally in 1979, I came back to the office one day, and my lawyer called, and there was a message. It said, "Jim, you got it." So I called him up and I said, "What the hell did I get?" And he said, "After all these years, the Supreme Court has turned down any appeal, and you're going to get the license." I said, "Oh my God, what am I going to do with it?" And he said, "Well, it'll take you a little time to figure it out because it has to go back through the court system, blah, 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 blah. It'll take a year and then blah, blah, blah." I said, "What do I do?" He said, "Well, we're going to make a deal with the Reynolds employees because the FCC does not want them terminated. And you can take over their station with their employees on Halloween night of '79. So we took over. And television news to that point was really all rape, robbery, and mayhem. That's all we reported. A couple of fires here, you know, a few murders over here, but we really didn't respond to what the community needed to know. We did nothing politically. We did some sports because that's an empty-headed thing. And I was very, very distressed about the fact that we did not respond to community needs. And that was really the original reason for filing the petition, although as it came down, Mr. Reynolds had a little problem with the truth, and the judge took the station away from him. To show you how severe it was, I think he was in 5 or 6 other escrows, and they backed him out of those. And he has since died. He left the state an unbelievable amount of money. They've just finished the new Performing Arts Center downtown, $475 million. So the town got good use of his bucks. Once we got the station in '79, this was the 130th market, something like that. When we went in the last day of taking over, Mr. Reynolds' people had destroyed everything there was. And the year before, when they thought they were going to lose it and had lost it, and it was coming back through the courts, they let their people go, they let the equipment go to hell, et cetera, et cetera. So even though we took over with 55 employees of theirs, we were in bad shape. If you'd multiplied our ratings by 50, you wouldn't have caught the CBS station in the area. So my partners had gotten a lot older in that 9 years, and so had I. So over a period of time, they thought I was a little bit of a wild man. And what I thought I should do is that I should start editorializing and taking on the powers that be, because I'm not real smart, and I have no sense at all. So I would get on the air twice a week, just to fill time, because we didn't have anybody there to do it. And I would do editorials, and I would take on everybody, the governor, the president, what the hell, didn't make any difference to me. And they decided that they needed to move on. So one of my partners and I bought them out. And it was a time when we took a look at their revenue, they had for the first time grossed $1 million. Last year we grossed 95. Okay? That's the difference. And that's because of the fact that the station had gone from the 127th market up to the 23rd in revenue. There was a time we were printing money. NBC has less than 7,000 employees over the whole world. You know, they're in your bedroom, they're in your bathroom, they're in the kitchen, they're everywhere, and you think, my God, this must be the biggest company in the world. Less than 7,000 employees. Of the 209 markets, originally the FCC said you can only own X number of markets. And then they changed that and said, well, if you own the 75th market, it may keep you from owning the 23rd. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the regulation so that you can now own up to 47%, I think it's 47, of the population. So pick out where you want to be, pick out the big markets, and that's what you're going to have. So I think all of the networks have come pretty close to the 45 or 47%. And then the rest will have to continue to be owned by people in the market. Now for me, having a station in a market that I own creates great freedom. The other stations that I compete against in Las Vegas are owned by the Milwaukee Journal and one out of another company out of Virginia and so forth. So they're big outfits. I'm a little guy. But I can do something that nobody else can do. And that is I can broadcast locally with local opinion, and they can't do it because they're always afraid if they come out and say something on the ABC network that somebody will call Milwaukee and hell will be raised, and all at once that will be quashed. So you find that the news is pretty fungible. Everybody runs the same stories every night. So over a period of time, we were literally printing money. And then came 2008. And our revenue dropped by 50%, just like that. And what happens to us is if you've got 100 spots and your car dealers go away and you lose 50 spots, all right? The 50 you've got left, you can't sell for what you used to sell that 50 for. So everything drives everything up. And it damn near broke us. We had a lot of syndicated programming, and I'm going to talk to you about that in a few minutes. But we reduced the size of our staff from 546 to 404. But we learned something along the way. And you talked about this last time when I was here. And that is this 30-second soundbite has got to go. It doesn't do anybody any good. And everybody in this America thinks that, by golly, if I've listened to 30 seconds of it, I don't need to know anymore. That's the whole picture. And I make my opinion based upon that. And we had this rule kind of in broadcasting that he who does the greatest number of stories in a half an hour wins the half an hour. And so we had a lot of spotters that would be on there for 30 seconds, blah, 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 blah. I said, we're going to stop all that. We're going to stop all of it because economically we can't afford to run that way. But secondly, we have all of this talent here that we don't use. We've just hired a young lady as a reporter, and she's got a degree in economics from Harvard. So you can't have her out there covering an automobile accident. That's stupid, right? And that's what was going on. It's, well, we have the most brilliant staff in the world, but we don't know how to use them. So we started 2 years ago, just after I was here, and we went through and we said, look, we're going to get rid of one anchor on every show. I don't need to be spending $275,000 a year to have somebody on the air 6 minutes reading what somebody else wrote. So I'm going to start paring down. And oh my God, Jim, you're going to go broke. We're moving anchors around, et cetera, et cetera. So what I tried to do was to take the same number of people that I had finally and to spread it among more newscasts. And then we went to NBC and said, we really want you to let us start broadcasting news at 4:30 in the morning. We'd started at 5. Fine, they said. So we went from 4:30 to 7. Right? And then we came back on with news at noon. We'd had a half an hour. We went to an hour. Same number of people. I then went to NBC. I hope this isn't published very much. But I went to NBC. I said, I got to tell you something. People used to congratulate me on having NBC and it had all of this wonderful programming. And I would say, so what? I didn't produce it. They produced it. It's their bag that that they can have such great pride. But I don't care about that. What I care about is what I produce. So then I called NBC and said, let's talk about Days of Our Lives. And I said, you know, I'd really like to put an hour of news in there rather than Days of Our Lives. And yesterday I watched it, and oh my God, I wanted to throw up. And I didn't get very far with that. No, Jim, we're going to do this. And of course, I think ABC dumped one of its soap operas and CBS dumped it. And I said, well, why can't we follow suit? And let's get rid of that hour. And even though they own that hour in effect. I said, why don't we do this? Let's split it. We'll do an hour of news, some of the national news, some of the local, and we'll split the revenue. Now, can't do that. Well, I'm hoping that I put the seed in their brain to do something. Then, at 6:30, I had been running. Oh shoot, I'll think of it in a second. One of these, like something Hollywood. Access Hollywood. Oh yeah, my favorite. Yeah. I own the station and I don't know, and you do. So I called NBC and I said, you know, I really would like to get rid of Access Hollywood. And we went through a whole bunch of stuff, and finally I got a little political push there, and they moved it to another station. So at that point, I took a show that had been run on one of the other local television stations, John Ralston. And he was one of these guys that get you in front of the camera and chew on you for a while. And we brought him over at 6:30 at night to move Access Hollywood out. And you know, we also own this, as you know, we own the station in Reno. And we simulcast a lot of this stuff. So, you know, our incremental cost of going to more news is nothing. And when we first started, we thought that the Ralston show wouldn't sell at all in northern Nevada, because North doesn't like South. And after about 3 weeks, our ratings went up higher in Reno than they did in Las Vegas. Now let me tell you about just before that. Judge Judy. I said, I can't watch it. I just can't watch it. You know, I spent years in a courtroom. I just can't watch it. Well, it brings in big ratings, blah, 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 blah. I said, I don't give a damn. That's not what I want our TV station to be. I don't want that. Well, we got a long-term contract. I said, get rid of the damn thing. Somebody else will like it. So we had been running it back-to-back in Reno at 4 and 4:30. Now, I don't know how you can gag down an hour of that stuff. But we took 1/2 hour off And we had the damnedest petition you've ever seen from the people up there saying, get that back on. And we said, no, we're not going to do it. So a month ago, or 2 months ago, I decided that we were going to go into the business of combining MSNBC and Fox. And so I said to my news director, I want you to go out and I want you to get me a flaming liberal and a lunatic conservative. And I want you to bring them in here. And I'm going to put them on the air every day, looking at each other, and let's see what happens. So we hired this, and they're just lovely people. And the gal was the conservative, the libertarian. So she said, I understand you're kind of liberal. I said, I am. And she said, well, what do you want from me? I said, here's what I want. I want you to make me so angry with what you say that I want to punch you in the face. Do you understand that? Because I don't care what you say. Go to it. I said, then it may be that the month after I have to build you a garage out back because I can't stand to look at you. Well, it's been very interesting because at first we made a mistake of labeling it as news. It's not news. Right? So we took that label off and we now call it the agenda. Strangely enough, it's done very well. And Las Vegas is not one of the great intellectual centers in this world. Our three questions are, what am I going to do Friday night? Can I raise the 60 payments to buy the Buick? And do you think I'll ever own a home? And that's pretty much it. But it has kind of grabbed hold, and now I'm going to show it in Reno, which cuts my costs. I have syndicated programming. I think I was the second station in the United States to buy Wheel and Jeopardy. And they made me rich. Okay? I think I bought it in 1981 or 82. And it did very well. And in fact, the ratings have not changed at all in 30 years. But it's very expensive. And I spend $40,000 a week for those programs. So I finally said to my manager the other day, you know, we need to do a little cost analysis here because I can't run fast enough to catch up. You know, what I'm doing is I'm working my butt off to make sure that Dr. Phil can get some money. So we run Wheel and Jeopardy at 7, and then we run Dr. Phil at 3, and the doctors at 2, Days of Our Lives at 1, and Rachel Ray, certainly one of the great minds of this century, at 11 o'clock. So I went to CBS, and CBS, you have to understand, owns all the programming. NBC has the one show. CBS owns everything. So I said to them, here's what I want you to do. I want you to peel this stuff off. Because the incremental cost to me of putting more news on is damn near nothing. And what's happened in Las Vegas is the same thing that's happened in a lot of big cities, and that is, it takes you an hour and a half to get home. So one of my friends, who was the head of the county commission, said, you know, Jim, I've lived here all my life as Harry Reid's son. He said, I've never seen a 6 o'clock news. I can't get home. I have no idea what the hell's going on from news. So what I would like to do is bump Wheel and Jeopardy at 7 and run a half-hour news, and then go with a second program of maybe I can bring the agenda up to that point. Then I can kick right into prime time. Now, it used to be that you program so that this one did well, then this one did well, and you lined them all up. People don't pay any attention to that. We couldn't give prime time away in the last 2 or 3 years. NBC has not exactly set the world on fire. Maybe it should have been reversed. So we've decided that we're going to get in the news business, and if we, more and more, if we can get rid of 7 o'clock, we'll put news in there for an hour. When we bumped Judge Judy at 4:30, we put a half-hour news in there. So we go in the morning, to repeat, 4:30 in the morning to 7, 12 to 1, 4 to 5, 5 to 6, and then we hope 6 to 7. And then we have a half hour at 11 o'clock. It's interesting that the trade has changed so much, because dealing with anchors used to be just the nightmare of your life. You'd start with these contracts and they would say, yeah, but I want to make sure that my children get to go to Hawaii for 3 weeks a day in the month, in the summer. And you got to pay for that. You say, well, it's taxable to you. I know it's taxable, but somebody across the street is getting 4 weeks or 2 weeks to Hawaii. And these contracts got longer and longer and longer. And finally we said, we can't afford it. And when you figure out how much an anchor is on the air, in a half hour of news, you've got 12 minutes of real broadcasting. And that's with the anchors on. Other times you got reporters, et cetera, et cetera. But the anchors are on there 12 minutes, 6 minutes apiece. Now, if you think that people watch to see, oh my God, there's Jeannie and there's Joe, you're kidding yourself. So I said, start to pull the anchors. And let's see what happens, because we're going to do exactly what they do nationally. There are no dual anchors nationally. Hadn't been for 20 years. And when they did have them, they didn't work. So we now we're starting to move our anchors so that one of the ladies does the 5:30 news, and the guy does the 6:30 news, or however it turns out. And it's going to work much better. And when we expand the stories now to put some substance in them, from 30 seconds to 3 or 4 minutes, you've got reporters on there who people look at and say, my God, this person really knows what they're talking about. And we follow it, day in and day out. If we don't do this, we won't have any revenue. And we're chasing it downhill. We can't push it uphill anymore. We're chasing it downhill. And, I've told all of our people, we've got all of these stations that we compete against, and we're going to be the last one standing. And the reason we can be the last one standing is we're not going to have these costs, and we can do locally what nobody else can do. We will editorialize. I personally run a show that, and I had Eileen on yesterday. I bring somebody in, and I interview them for a 5-day period. And I do 5 to 7 minutes every day. So when they come in, they sit there and we take 40 minutes to do a week. And when we get to the second one, obviously they can say, well, yesterday I said this and I forgot to say that, or tomorrow I'm going to talk about this. And as I said to Eileen yesterday, the only thing people will say is when they see you is, don't you own more than one dress? Because you're going to have the same thing on every day. But using that type of format, the amount of information we've gotten out there, and people listen to it now. We run it at noon. We don't have many viewers, but it doesn't cost anything because I own the joint. That's where we're going to go. I think that's where television is going to have to go. I think there will be a lot of stations just closed down, period, closed down. I'm hopeful that I'm trying to sell a couple of mine. I originally got into the business and I expanded to 5 states. And I got to the point where I had, in effect, every household in Nevada, with my Channel 3 in Vegas and my Channel 4 in Reno. I could cover it all. I could cover everything. Then I moved to Idaho, and I bought East Idaho. And then I moved to Wyoming, which has 12 people. And I bought all the stations there. So I was in 5 states. And I did it for rather strange reasons. I was talking to a fella in New York, and I said, if you call your United States Senator, how long does it take him or her to get back to you? Well, 2 or 3 days. I said, I'm in 5 states. I got 10 United States Senators. They're in one of them I can't call and get a return phone call in 15 minutes. Not a one. And not only that, but I know every one of them very, very well. I said, let me tell you what happened to me. I go to the Final Four every year. And I said, I was in the car driving down toward the basketball arena. I got this phone call. Jim, yes, this is Senator blah, blah. I said, well, it's good to talk with you, good to talk with you. What do you need? Can you send me 25 grand for my campaign? I said, you bet, it's in the mail. I said, now where else would that happen? You can, in Montana, I can have a U.S. Senator come to see me, spend the whole morning. He's got nothing else to do. You remember the famous Larry Craig? Remember Larry? Huh? Well, Larry came to see me in Pocatello. And yeah, big market, big market. So I finally went out to the manager and I said, get this guy the hell out of my office. He's boring me to death. He has nothing to talk about except going quail hunting or some damn thing like that. Anyway, that was useful to me for a period of time. But those days are gone. I can't afford to subsidize those anymore. And that's what my stations in Vegas were doing. And in Reno, they were subsidizing the other stations because of the additional things that we thought we bought. Okay, so she tells me I'm done. I've run out of stories. So you can ask questions and I'll answer them all.
So what we'll do is we'll take some questions, and then I actually have a couple of questions, but I'm going to reserve that towards the end. Go ahead, and we'll repeat the questions for the camera.
So, Blockbuster thought everything was going okay, and the world changed around them.
Yeah.
TV's changing. How do you see TV from a local station's point of view?
The local station has to broadcast all local news. I mean, look at, I can't compete. You take 200 cable channels, right? You can find all the programming you want. So if something comes along and ends up in cable, they could wipe out my Wheel in Jeopardy in 30 minutes. So now I'm subsidizing that, and I don't have any viewers. So the only way I think I can protect myself is to get rid of anything that competes with the national program and make everything local, because nobody can do local news like I can. Nobody. I mean, I can live at the legislature, you know, in Carson City. I got a whole staff of people up there, and we broadcast here again to every house in the state. So that's what I've got to do. I've got, everything that I do has got to be local news. And then we fill it with some of the federal stuff that, you know, makes some difference, at least on who's running for president, things like that. But in our state, we are in such bad shape that the public now is starting to look at it and say, oh my God, we thought we had the cash cow of all time here. I was telling him that I was talking with a law professor at UNLV the other day, and she's in the minorities group. And she said, 2 years ago, Jim, 45% of our students had to have supplemental funds for their lunch. 45%. This year it's 65%. And then you wonder why we have an education system that graduates less than 50% of the students who make it to the 8th grade. But I tell people, they didn't quit the last day of the 8th grade being a 4.0 student. They quit in the 3rd grade. That's when they quit. And then we have this brilliant governor who thought that he would come out with a policy that if you couldn't pass a test at the end of your 2nd year, you didn't get to go to 3rd grade. Now think about that. We have this tremendous minority population that doesn't speak any English. So you get the kid in there, they're frustrated for the 1st and the 2nd grade, and they say, it's over, bud. You're not going any further. So everything we have done has compounded the problem. So we have some really, I mean, everybody's got these problems all over the country, but not as bad as we have. And so we have an education system that is less than mediocre. We've had this myth for years, you know, that what the hell do you need a college education for? Hell, you can go out on the Strip and park cars to make $100 grand a year. Well, there never were 50,000 people out there doing that, but that's the world that we lived in. And everybody just made lots of bucks. You know, you'd go out to dinner with a few people, and I mean, Beverly and I finally said, I can't afford, I don't want to do that. I don't care how much money I've got. I don't want to do that. I don't want to take 6 people to dinner and have the bill at $1,100. I don't want to do that. And so if you're a waiter, right, and you serve X number of tables that night, and somebody adds 15% on that, hell, you got a yacht sitting down at Lake Mead. So it's not that, my feeling, it's not that the economy collapsed. I don't think it collapsed. I don't think it was ever there. I think it was all air for probably the 5 to 10 years before we finally figured out, oh my God, look what this is. So.
Any other questions? Please.
You mentioned before that you did a show that was political, where you had, I think you said, a flaming liberal and a lunatic conservative.
Mm-hmm.
Fox is generally known as being somewhat conservative, and some of your stations are Fox stations?
I had 1 or 2.
Yeah. To
But
what extent do they dictate what goes on as far as the politics?
they don't.
They don't. Okay.
No, you wouldn't put up with that and it's not in their interest. They really don't. Now, for example, the Fox station in Las Vegas, the last time President Obama had a major speech, they didn't run it. And I went public with the fact that they didn't run it. Now, there are lots of folks I don't agree with, but for my little show, you know, I did Herman Cain and Santorum and Ron Paul, and I invited Romney and Huntsman to come on, and I don't beat up on anybody. You know, I ask you, what do you think about this? So I was really distressed that they censored that show by not running it. So I went public with it. I never got a call from them. With us, we didn't want to do. I mean, when I do anything on the air, I always start out. As you know, I'm a liberal. So you get that out of the way right now. But here are my feelings. And if you want to say something opposite, you come on the air, and we'll give you the time. We've never ever turned down anybody to do a rebuttal editorial or come on the air. Now, most of them don't have the guts to do it, right? But it's there, and that's what it should be. That's what it should be.
So I loved hearing about this strategy, and I think that, you know, really giving deeper exposure to local politics and local issues is going to be really critical going forward for the news area. Are you aware of any other station owners who are taking that tactic?
There aren't any other station owners.
There you go.
That's the problem. You see, all of the stations are owned by fewer than 30 people. That's all of the stations.
Wow.
And so when, you know, we can sit down, I could sit down tonight at my table and have dinner with every owner of an NBC station, because there are 209 of them, right? The first 30 markets or 40 markets are owned by NBC. Then it starts to drop off, and then you've got people like the Bullitt sisters who own Seattle and Portland and Hawaii and Louisville. I was born in Louisville. That's why I say it's so funny. And Atlanta. So you're talking about very few people controlling this area. And because they all have to respond to shareholders, it makes their life entirely different from mine. I mean, they all think I'm crazy. And so what? You know, so what? What are you going to do to me? Nothing. You can't, I hope. I need a new person to start my car.
But Jim, eventually you do have to pay the bills. And I think that sort of, you know, maybe gets to the next point, which is how do you then envision dealing with the internet and YouTube and all that hyper-local content that is created with cell phone cameras. And
well, the ratings are never going to be what they were. You know, I can remember coming home at night after Cosby was on. Okay? Everybody in the world watched Cosby. It was doing 25 ratings. That's a lot of ratings. And now we do well if we do an 8, right? But our costs were always so small relative to our income. You know, my profit margin was 68%. You don't find many companies that you can bring in $1 and take the money out the front door. So it's relative. You know, we'll do fine. We won't do that again, but we'll do fine because we're just monopolistic enough to where we can keep other people from doing other things. But those days are over, and they probably should be over, you know.
Would you like to say a few words about your love affair with the First Amendment?
so the question was about love affair with the First Amendment.
You know, I don't know where all that started. My grandparents, my grandfathers were ministers and certainly spoke their minds. And I grew up with that. And just the need to be able to speak your mind at any time and any place. I don't think there's anything more important than that. And I just, you know, I keep going at it, and people will call and say, what the hell are you doing saying that? I said, well, come on and answer this. I'll put you on the air. But I'm going to say what I think. And you got a right to come on and tell me what you think. That's the glory of it all. Why in the hell? And I think the national television companies made a terrible mistake. If I had been designing MSNBC, I'd have kept Fox out of the business, because I would have had their conservatives on my air. Right. And I would have had the fist fights and all of that. Right. That would have done it. But instead, MSNBC brings all of the liberals on, and they bring all the conservatives. Yeah. And you can't really get anything because there's never any discussion. Right. There's just accusation. You're an idiot. No, you're an idiot. No, you're an idiot. Right. No, you're an idiot. I can't get. I never could get that one.
Anybody else? I'll come back to you, Lindsay.
One thing that kind of bothers me is this trend towards 2 points of view, and so many issues are more complex than that. So can you say anything about that?
Well, if you had 4 points of view, I'd be happy to put them on. I would. But the problem is the views that are there now are so extreme, it seems to me, and they encompass everything on this side or this side, rather than having it kind of splotchy around. I don't know what'll happen with that. Boy, the quality of the people now is not very good, is it? Is that I do Twitters every morning, and I ship them out. But the advantage that I have is that I have my morning anchor read them. So I've got about 2,100 people that are on Twitter, but I got 90,000 people every morning that get to hear every word. And we get great comments. I mean, I got on Sarah Palin's back for a while. And then we had this other genius in Nevada who ran against Harry Reid, Sharon Angle. Oh, right. Oh my God! Oh my God! You're sitting there going, it's not a question. I shouldn't even be talking this way. It's not a question of political views. Right. It's just raw intellect. Right. How can you say that? How can you say you don't know there are 2 Koreas? How can you say that? And then the next week say, I will debate Obama on any subject at any time. That's sick. Anyway.
But it makes good TV.
Yeah. And I have to say that Harry Reid and I grew up together. We went to high school together, graduated together. He went to one law school, I went to another. We took the bar together in '63. We tried cases against each other. And that's been a big help to me. It really has. But when you think, and Harry, I don't care what you think about Harry. Harry's a pretty good guy. But when you think that Harry Reid was going to lose for a year and a half against this idiot, and you just wonder, how the hell can we be this way, that we know so little about what's going on? If you took a survey in Nevada and said to 100 people, what's the name of the governor? 20 of them wouldn't know. That is really scary. And I'm kind of a nut. I watch this stuff all day long. I go to work at 7 in the morning. I go home at 2, turn on the TV, and I watch news till the rest of the day. In fact, my wife, I'm a liberal. She's a flaming liberal. So she came into me one day and said, "What in the hell are you doing? You're watching Glenn Beck?" I said, "Yeah, I am." I said, "I got to find out, what's going on the other side." Anyway, I'm probably going too far now.
Keep going.
Yeah, but this is a fun business. We have a good time at it. We really do. We're very honest. We are honest, not very honest. We're just honest. Treat everybody equally. And I was talking to a friend who runs my life. She's my secretary. And I said, you've got 7 months now for our show. So you've got 28 weeks, in effect, of which 28 are you going to bring on during that period? Because we don't turn anybody down. We never have. And in fact, a couple of times when too many people have asked to be on, we put them on, rather than just the noon show, we put them on the 4, or the 5, or the 6 to make sure that everybody gets on there. And I shouldn't tell you how I do this, but I will. The interviewees get to write the questions. And it makes all the difference in the world. Because I tell them, I'm not here to ambush you. I want you to get your views out. And quite frankly, I don't know enough about your views to guess the question I should ask you to get those views out. And I say, I'm going to have 5 questions. No question will have more than 10 words in it. And the only thing I want you to make sure you don't do to me is, when you start answering Mondays, you can't talk about Fridays, because otherwise it wipes me out. And it really works. I hope, like with John Ralston, he's very confrontational. Well, didn't you do this? That's got to stop. That foolishness has got to stop. You want somebody to be on the air. A lot of people won't come on the air because they think you're going to ambush them. And you want somebody to come on the air, let them come on the air and talk. And they will say to me, "I don't know whether I can go 5 or 6 minutes." I say, "Yes, you can. You believe me, you can." And if I see you run out of gas, and I'll see it in your eyes, I'll give you a follow-up question. And it's just done very well.
So maybe a couple more questions, but I would like to follow up on that. We are in the election cycle. Mm-hmm. Where do you see, and we all hear the discourse or the lack of discourse, in the media. Where do you see the local stations playing?
We're it.
Particularly in this election cycle.
We're it. We're it. And as soon as we get the first ad in, we get a call from the other side that says, "You better take that off the air or we're going to sue you." Well, take your best shot. And we always say to them, "You don't like that ad? You think it's a bunch of lies? Well, you can respond to it." And that works. I forgot to tell you this. In political, we really do well. We really do well. Harry Reid asked me one day, he said, you know, is there anything I could do for you? I said, yeah, I'll tell you what I want. I want a constitutional amendment. I want an election every year. Because we lose money in the off years, or whatever you call them, and we make lots of money in the political years. And ads they're really interesting. You know, the effect of an ad only lasts 3 days, 3 or 4 days. That's why you get to see them over and over and over. And then they will call and say, there's a fact in there that's wrong. Well, make your own ad up and tell them it's wrong. Otherwise, we can't get into the censorship business. We just can't do it. I don't believe in it anyway. You know, I frankly don't care what anybody says. Let the public sift out what's true, or let somebody on the other side sift it out and say, you know, last night this jerk said this, and that's not right. That's why I really believe in the First Amendment, right? Thank you.
Thank you very much.